into the right places. All right. Checking YouTube. I don't see it live there yet. Why is it not live on YouTube?
Is the delay like 12 seconds? Do you know?
Might be. That could be. All right.
Noella says it's good.
Popping on. All right, I'm going to go ahead and copy this link so I can. Noella, while you're there, give it a thumbs up. Be a friend of the channel. Doing a live Q&R about the local worship project. Check it out and post your questions. All right. Get that link there. I think the only place I ever publish this to is LinkedIn right now.
As a live?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I used to do it with Restream, like restreaming it to it, but I found I get more engagement when I just do it this way for some reason. All right. Okay, well, let's hop into it here. So, hello, everybody. My name is Casey Klocek, and once again, we are here on the 7-Day Worship live stream Mondays, having some fun at 7 p.m. Central, and just hanging out, talking about really cool stuff. We did have a guest that was going to come on today, and that guest unfortunately had to cancel last minute, and that's okay. This is not supposed to be a super polished thing. So when that happens, we can weave and we can move into something different. And, we've, over the last few weeks here, been trying to get into the conversation about the local worship project. I've talked about it a lot in these streams, and we just haven't really been able to get past the roundtable conversations to get into it. And so what we decided to do is just to host a Q&R, question and response episode here. It's going to be a little shorter today, just talking about the local worship project. And so I got a few questions that people asked that we'll get into. What is it? Why are we doing it? How does that help with the market? So on. And then after that, if you guys have any questions that you want to post, we'll get to those as well. But I'm here joined, of course, always, not always, he's been gone for some weeks here, but for the most part, with Chris Rosentrader. Chris, you want to say hey?
Hey, I'm glad we're doing it. I mean, I think when we started this August, not the live stream, but me and you started talking last August, and then we were like, hey, let's take this conversation online. It kind of got hectic and busy, and so I think we're still figuring out what the live stream looks long term, but I'm excited to get you to talk about, your local worship project, but it's obviously going to touch some worship theology thoughts and concepts. So it'll be good. It'll be good.
Yeah, no, I'm really pumped about it. So let's do that. Let's jump into. Let's probably first just say a prayer, because we didn't do that. We normally pray before we jump into these things live. We should do that first, just to kind of reset here. And then, let's just dive into the story behind it. And I'll just give a little history on it of where it started and where it's evolved into, and then what we're planning on doing with it over the next year. And then we can get into some live questions there. But let's go ahead and pray. All right. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you so much for today. I want to thank you for every opportunity we have to worship you, to elevate you at the highest in our lives, Father. And I pray that on Mondays, as people kind of go crazy preparing for Sunday, and even trying to prepare in their homes to make that a special time for their families and even other people with hospitality, it can sometimes feel like Monday is just going back into a grind of work. But I pray that that we would be able to offer some kind of safe haven and refuge for people to realize that we get to focus on you every single day. We get to think about you. We get to talk about you. And we get to nerd out about cool things that have to do with you and your kingdom every single day. Nothing stopping us from doing it. And so, Father, I pray that this could be a reset for some, that this can be a safe place for others, and it can be an inspiration to others, even from them. And Father, I pray that today, as we talk about this project that you gave to me and my wife a long time ago, and that I've been able to talk about with Chris quite a bit as I've come to know him, that you would just give more clarity to what needs to happen. And I pray that this would accomplish your purposes as you will. We love you, Father, and we just commit this live stream to you and to whoever listens to it. May they just be blessed in Jesus' name. Amen.
Can I have an opening statement?
Please.
I think this is me pulling stuff out of you, interviewing you.
Great.
In a way. So we share why we were together and decided to do this is, well, one, I really believe God brought us together because we're pursuing similar things and there's significant overlap. And so what I really appreciate about you is your heart for the church and the application of music as worship offering in the church, in the body. And I share that heart with you. But tell me why it matters to you that we get this correct. Not LWP, we'll get in that in a second, but like why it matters to you that the way we think about worship and the offering of music with the why is it important to you?
So we're narrowing it down, the lens of worship, to music and the offering of music. Why is it important that we get it right? And I'm assuming by right, I'm assuming you mean we get it biblically as accurate as we can, or as close to biblical foundations and truths as we can.
Okay. Why if we're because eventually we're going to get to an idea of why you think is going to help take us in a correct trajectory, but why does it? Why do we need to think correctly about this?
Yeah, I think music is probably one of the most sticky substances that we have as human beings in general. I can tell you something, or I can sing it to you, and you're probably, even if I do a poor job singing it, you're probably going to remember the point more just because I sang it to you. And music in the church these days, and always, has been a way that people have delivered the words of God to each other down from generation to generation, within the home, within gatherings, all sorts of places, so that people could remember the work of the Lord from their fathers' all the way to what he was doing in present day. And so that is a tradition that we are commanded to continue in so many ways in the Bible. It's important that we remember the function of music in the biblically correct way, and that we honor the way that it was supposed to be delivered, both messaging and the call to it, the response from it, so that we can worship the Lord, we can lift him up, not in a general way, but in the specific way that he is calling us to do so in those moments. And so I think, I'll stop there for now. Yeah.
It just occurred to me, we sing the ABCs.
Yeah.
As there 26 letters in the alphabet, you're remembering a sequence of 26 by singing it. Yeah. So here I'll summarize, and I would agree. One of the aspects about, we get parts of our theology from singing and reinforcing scripture through singing. So you're probably going to get into this with your background with you and Autumn, but you were worship pastor in the church, been a musician in the church. So what are the things you've observed the week to week? Even in your prayer, you said you're referencing Monday morning stress out or hit the road, however you call it. Like what were your observations? How many years were you there? And what were your observations to make you care to build something different?
Yeah, I mean, I was in the church for about 18 years doing ministry in the local context of just being a worship pastor, being a church planter, revitalizationist, children's pastor. I was hanging out in the youth pastoral role for a while, did some preaching and all sorts of stuff. So I wore a bunch of hats in the church. I've been part of small, medium, large churches. And there's a couple things that we get wrong, and in the church context, like even staffers, where we know we're getting it wrong, but we kind of still yield to it. The word worship's a good example in general. So you have a worship department. I'm a worship pastor. What does that mean? What does it mean that I'm a worship pastor? I mean, if we just break it down that way, you're a worship shepherd. You're like, well, what is that? And so the way that we've kind of used those terms in today's language in the church, we know it as the person who facilitates musical worship to the Lord and facilitates that worship for the people in the congregation to come into the presence of the Lord. That's how it's really communicated. And even in application processes where you go in and you're applying to a church, they'll say that straight up, that we want you to facilitate the congregation's presence before the Lord. We want you to bring them into the presence of the Lord. And it's always sat a little strange to me, because if the church is for Christians, the Christians are always in the presence of the Lord. It is where we gather in his name that he gathers with us, right? It's kind of an inversion of that. So we don't come there for us to facilitate us coming before him. We actually are inviting him to come to us. Like it's a little strange how we've verbalized that.
I was having a convo the other day, I think with Steph, but I'm like on a walk or something. I'm thinking worship pastor. What does that? And I'm thinking, what is the closest? So if you're going to say a church is hiring a worship pastor, what is the best scripture to support that idea?
Songs, hymns, and spiritual songs would probably be the passage that I think people go to, because you're commanded to sing that. You're commanded to do that. And so I think that is the most common Bible verse that worship pastors will use all the time. But at the same time, it's about a niche within worship anyways. So it still doesn't really answer the question.
And I think
what is that,
Yeah. And I think that what you're saying about, I think it's a definition of words. When a church says, you said job application, post the job, worship pastor, what they mean is program administrator. In the best case, for that, program director.
Yeah.
In a church with money or of size, they really mean musical director.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but the blanket is worship pastor, but yet, I mean, which would imply shepherd, and your team is so big that they need discipleship, but you don't call someone that leads a home group pastor, which is arguably more pastoral than what a worship pastor actually, like, it's seriously an administration position, but we say pastor, but like, so it has like the meat of and the spirituality of it, but it's really like, we just need someone to find people to volunteer and schedule them and make a list.
Yeah.
Which I think probably many people that would watch this that are supportive of you and what you're trying to do might feel the grief and what you're saying about the Monday weight of producing a program, and it gets so far from where probably a lot of their hearts are. Like, I want to build a team. I know this of you. You care about your people. You want them not to miss the point through the program, not to get overwhelmed by the program, but really we're facilitating or participating, using our gifts in the presence of God as one aspect of what we're supposed to do weekly or when we're together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the word worship is the only problem with what I've ever had with the role. And a lot of churches get it right. They say music director, music pastor, things like that. So I'm not going to like dunk on everybody, but the catch-all really is worship leader or worship pastor. It's one of the two. You kind of graduate to a worship pastor role when you get paid more than your full time. But I think most roles in a church that are pastoral um, in language are more of an administrative in practice, and so the title doesn't really matter too much. It matters how you're applying that. I actually think
Yeah.
the life group leader, like you said, I think if a church modeled itself to where they empowered those life group leaders to say, "Hey, you are one of the pastors in our church," right? Like, and they actually gave them that title, not in the sense of like lifting them up, but responsibility of it. I think you'd see a lot more men get involved in their local church if you did something like that. You
Yeah,
said,
I
no,
think
no, no,
that,
no, you're
yeah, it's like the elder deacon thing. But yeah, I agree with my experience. My experiences, I've worked for a couple churches and been in it my whole life, and that has been my experience where the family pastor or the children's pastor or the worship pastor, they're really just running a program and it's an administrative. And I think
yeah,
that's a frustration for a lot of people because they if they want to care and they want to grow and they want to develop, they get stuck in this, what would, I
yeah.
don't know how you would call it, um, weight of the
Well,
system maybe.
yeah, I mean, it's a weekly grind where you're just continually pursuing the same thing, um, which is just making the program happen and trying to make the program better. And so, if you don't find a way to escape that and to realize, yeah, I should be pastoring the volunteers that I'm working with, if you don't find a way to escape the grind with building a good infrastructure, then of repeatable processes and systems and stuff, which is not what most creative worship pastors are good at. If you can do that, then you start getting back to the roots of what you were called to do, which is working with people and sharing the Bible with them, praying with them, and
Hmm.
teaching them, taught by them. And you start having time to actually do church the way it was meant to be while the program keeps going. But that's a whole nother discussion of how that can work. And I don't want
Yeah.
to get into it. But that was another
So
observation
tell
too.
so you're at your church, you're serving, you and your wife start dreaming, thinking about what this new idea or what if scenario. Talk about that.
Yeah. So it was 2020 when COVID was going around. And actually, I mean, far before that, I had this idea of 7 Day worship, local worship project as like ideas. They weren't really music related. They were more to do with helping to train, equip, and unite the local church was kind of the vision there. And so the idea was like, okay, that's really vague. What does that mean? How do we train? How do we equip? And how do we unite the local church? I just knew those were three things that God put on my heart to always accomplish wherever I went, and that would just change in different contexts. Um, and it wasn't until in COVID that I heard God say "Go" when like the whole church kind of shut down. And when the whole church shut down, I noticed because I always wanted to unite local churches together. Um, they were willing to do that because they didn't know how to stream. That was like the biggest issue. And so, because Church A didn't know how to use a camera and Church B did, I could get them talking to each other. And so that was my goal really for the local worship project, was to take back that word worship and say, hey, how can we get the whole church to start thinking of uniting in this context? And so I had like a facilitator that was going to facilitate relationships between denominational churches and try to just get relationships going practically through saying, hey, I need some help with sound and I need some help with video and lighting or whatever. And they would just connect with each other and start building bridges. as quick as COVID happened and those walls came down, COVID ended the shutdown, and the walls flew up right away, and people just stopped talking again. Um, and so in that
Like
moment, I was
they went back to 2019 way to do church.
oh yeah, even
Not
worse.
talking. Yeah.
Yeah, even worse in some ways. They grew even more dogmatic. It was so strange because what I started doing in 2020 when I was doing the local worship project, actually have a YouTube where I was starting these types of conversations with local leaders, and I was doing it with music because we were the ones who were trying to unite the churches really by figuring out the streaming. We all had to figure that out, and so I was able to cross the lines and talk to people constantly, um, and yeah, eventually when it ended, those walls went up pretty high. But I did notice that everybody that I had talked to, it didn't matter what denomination, what affiliation people were with, we had a pretty tight little community we were building with people, and that was cool. And so I stopped focusing on it for a bit because I felt like God was saying, "Hey, just wait." After that, and then, but he still wanted me to discover some things, and um, through some stuff with our church that I was part of, not wanting me to continue pursuing those things, the leadership in that church, and God saying, no, keep pursuing it. We ended up moving to another position out of state where I just became an audio production guy at a pretty large church. And I was just working over there trying to ask God, like, hey, what do you want me to do with this? I'm going to pick up the ball here and make space for this because now I'm not like the leader of the whole ministry. I'm just a guy 3 levels down who gets to just do audio. So with that, I had time to be able to focus at that point. And that's where God really led me on the discovery of challenging me and saying, hey, I didn't just give you this idea to train, equip, and unite people and this passion for that. I trained you in music for a reason. And I've had you around music your entire life for a reason. And so he started pivoting me from this idea of uniting church through practical means to saying, no, music's how that works. And this is why. And so I started asking people questions who were in the industry. I started asking people questions at churches, and it's going on a year-long discovery of asking bad questions, then asking slightly better questions, until finally it kind of molded into what the local worship project is now, which is to really give people another option, not to destroy something that currently exists with music for the local church, but to really get back to the right heart posture and the idea of giving everything you have so that nobody has any need with music, but also with the church, so that artists and church can actually support each other in a beautiful way and get to know each other. So there's a lot to that, but that's kind of the short, zipped version of it.
What do you mean by heart posture?
What do I mean by heart posture?
Yes, I love this word, this phrase.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we talk about all the time. Yeah, and it really is because of that discovery that phrase really came up to me, and it's what clicks. It's what helps people understand what I mean. A heart posture isn't what I do; it's why I do it. It's the intention behind the what. So if I'm gonna worship the Lord, my heart posture is what God's looking at. My hands in the air are what maybe the person next to me sees. And so it's, why are my hands going up? What's the heart behind that? Am I doing it because I want people to see that I'm really worshiping the Lord, like the guy who was in the temple just praying that super fancy prayer? Or am I doing it because I can't be contained like David and I just have to shout it? Like, what's the motive? What's the why behind the what? And I think that's what I mean by heart posture.
Yeah, that's the you can fake the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart.
And I don't even
Right?
think it's always faking. I think
Yeah.
sometimes it's just that you've been indoctrinated almost, if I could use that word, into a way of thinking that your heart is correct, but it's just not focused on the right thing. And yeah, so I don't think it's always bad intention either. I think it's good intention sometimes, but just the training we've had growing up, it just varies so much. And so being able to say, okay, and evaluate, ask yourself the question, why am I doing this thing?
And you're connecting it. You said just a minute ago, you're connecting it to giving. Mm-hmm. Your heart posture is one giving, or your heart posture is such that you're more interested to give than, I'm assuming, receive. You're more interested in giving than getting, which speaks to how you might feel about the state of things. Like, so what are people giving? What are they? What's your ask to people that are participating? What are they giving?
In what context?
Like, so if you're saying it's a local worship project, I might be messing you up a little bit, but local worship project is an effort to correct or get people operating from the right heart posture, which is giving. Mm-hmm. So like if we assume we're correcting or reinforcing or discipling, or however you're going to say it, heart posture, and now they're going to give, like, what are they, how are they thinking about their gift, or like what's the, if you're tying it broadly to musicians or congregants or people in the church,
mm-hmm.
What's the giving goal? What are they doing?
So the heart posture of giving is saying that it's worth something, I guess, is the way that I found scripturally it needs to be said. So the example I always use is David with the census. There's a couple passages of that, 2 Samuel and then Chronicles. And 2 Samuel, when you see David really doing one of the last, well, it's the last thing we see of him doing in the Bible. He goes from David and Goliath, and his heart posture is, guys, what's wrong with you? Don't you know God is on our side? And like he's given our enemies into our hands. Like that's his heart posture here. He just knows it. And he's so confident in God that he'll do anything because he knows that God is bigger than Goliath. But then we see him at the end of his reign, after everything he's gone through, and we see him invert that and say, I want to see how mighty we are as a nation to be able to take on our enemies. And so how strong are we, or how strong am I, to be able to take on the people who are around us who are coming to unite against us? And so it's the inversion of what you see at the beginning of him. And his heart was on something completely different at that point than it was at the beginning of his life. And so because of that bad call that he makes and taking a census, and then also disobeying some of the commands that are made of when you take a census, you're supposed to give like offerings to God for every person that you take a census piece for. He just doesn't do that. He's warned against it by his generals. He does it anyways.
That's interesting. He has direct reports that are telling him, don't do this.
Yeah, great guys who have been with him forever, who are like, don't do this, and didn't want any part of it. And he just didn't listen. And he said, no, I'm going to trust my own strength here. I'm not going to trust God's strength. I'm going to trust my own. And so he orders them to do it, doesn't do it the right way. And what you see is God coming to him through a prophet and saying, hey, you got one of three options here. It's all bad. But one of three options.
You do not want to be in this situation.
No. It's like either, your family is going to get really messed up here, right? Like either you guys are going to take a hit, or the whole nation's going to take a hit, essentially, with a couple different avenues that could happen. And David ultimately responds with, okay, let us just let you do what you want to do. Let you do what you want to do. And he puts it back off to God. And so a plague comes. And it starts killing thousands and thousands of people. Tens of thousands of people are dying. So by the time it finally comes to Jerusalem, his heart posture starts to change. And David finally says, God, take me and my family, but spare the city. Just take us. And so when he says that, the prophet comes back and says, I want you to go up to this high place and I want you to make a sacrifice. So I want you to come and I want you to meet me and I want you to worship me at this high place. And so while he's going, his heart posture is being challenged here. You know, his insides are being challenged. Who is the highest in your life here? And so he's starting to walk up to this high place, and God goes ahead of him and prepares the guy who's going to receive him, Araunah the Jebusite. And he tells him, hey, king's coming, and he's going to make a sacrifice. Make sure he's ready. And he has everything he needs. And so David comes, and he famously, when Araunah comes up to him and says, hey, I want you to have all these things. They're free. Take it all. So we're talking about giving. I have the oxen. I got the wood. I got the oil.
By the way, this guy's heart posture is correct.
100%.
God told him, give him your space, provide for everything. And he's like, what? I wonder if he knew that David had taken the census.
I mean, I would think so, because the plague would have gone through his area too. And so he has to have, I mean, the same desire of, okay, God, like, if that's what you want to happen in order for this to stop, you know, like.
Yeah, it's like you're talking thousands and thousands of dollars of his own that he's saying, provide for.
Yeah.
And he doesn't argue.
Well, and the plot of land. He's got this whole threshing floor, which is huge, where God meets him, and this is the location where on this high place that this is going to happen. And he offers it all to David. Take the whole threshing floor, take all the property, and here's the materials to make the sacrifice. And so David famously responds to him, no, I need to pay you for it. And he says, no, I want you to take it. And so there's kind of this pushback of like, no, I want to give, no, I need to give, no, I need to give, no, I need to give. And they land in a place where David pushes back and he says, no, it has to cost me something. And so he pays him. And he makes him get paid for it, right? Like, he forces him to get paid for it, which is great. And so the guy providing the materials for David to come and worship the Lord is being paid by the person coming to worship the Lord. So I think it's a really good interaction of the heart posture there of a songwriter, for instance, who is preparing the materials for somebody to come and worship the Lord, having this heart posture of, I want to give it. No, you need it. You need it. So I'm going to give it. And then the other person on the other side who's coming to worship the Lord and needs those materials saying, no, it's worth something. So I'm going to give, and you're going to have to take it. And so that was a beautiful little picture, I think, of what we see. And eventually on that threshing floor where God accepts that sacrifice and the plague ends, we see many years later his son Solomon building the temple. And then that temple, fast forward to John 2, you see Jesus at that temple experiencing the exact same transaction, which is people are there, merchants are there selling the tools for people to come and worship the Lord. They're selling lambs and doves and all sorts of things. And as it gets later in the day, it starts to cost more. They raise their prices because they're running out of stock. And so supply and demand, they're starting to pinch those pennies, as it were. And they are over there counting the coins in front of Jesus. And so that's when Jesus loses it. And he takes the tables, he flips them over, he makes a whip, whips them out, and whips the sacrifices out, mind you, whips all the animals out. And so what we see when he's asked, why are you doing this? He says, stop turning my Father's house into a marketplace. I don't think Jesus had a problem with the transaction. I think Jesus had a problem with them pinching the pennies off to the side and making more than what it was worth. And so I don't think.
Yeah, so what is it fair? He was saying the marketplacer's heart posture was incorrect.
Yeah.
They wanted to help, like the guy that David paid, but they were taking the profit motive, and now the profit motive is influencing their decisions.
Yeah.
Versus helping people honor the Lord with what they've been commanded to worship with.
Exactly. Yeah. And
so now connect this to local worship project.
Yeah. And that's where I started in that story. And this is how, when I explain to people, this is really helpful. because the songwriter in this case scenario is somebody who is the only person who can supply that form of material for the person who can't creatively write a song to the Lord. And when we're coming together and we're commanded to sing to the Lord, then we're out of options if we don't have music, if we don't have the ability to do it.
So in this illustration,
Mm-hmm.
the song is the grain offering. The song is the wine offering. The song is the lamb. The song is the dove.
Mm-hmm.
In our modern context at 10 a.m. Sunday church, right? That's what we're connecting. So people today say, if in the best case, are saying, I want to bring a sacrifice. I want to go to the temple. I want to go to the church building to worship with others, but we need a...
And you can fill in the blank, right?
Yeah,
I think you can fill in the blank. And songs are one. So to be really clear about this, music is just one of those types of offerings. Worship is not just music, again. And so the
right
to make sacrifices to the Lord is not just music, but we can start there because we are familiar with it. And so if we can lock that piece in, I think it's going to domino a lot of other sacrifices that we should be making on Sunday and every day of the week, but especially on Sunday as a community. And so I don't know, like that's why I think of it that way. We also think about it, I think, with like what would be another sacrifice be? Another sacrifice would be probably when people would come to the altar back in the day when they were invited up there. Bringing their own sacrifice to the Lord and laying it down at the altar was the idea. So I'm going to lay this and submit this to the Lord in prayer. And we know, like, good hymns from back in the day, take it to the Lord in prayer. What a privilege to carry. And there's like this, but I mean, that's like a Billy Graham thing, where he made that really, really popular, where it was bring those things to the altar and the altar call. But that's probably the extent of what we think of when it's bringing a sacrifice to the Lord. We don't really think on Sundays we do that. But worship is very much that, in music especially, because we're sacrificing. A lot of people who can't sing are going to sacrifice their pride, for instance, right? Like they're going to let go for a moment, who don't have rhythm and don't have musical prowess, and they're just going to worship the Lord. If they don't, they're really not sacrificing in that moment. And the tool's there for them to use. They just aren't using it. And so, yeah, I guess that would just be a clarification I would have on the tools that we use.
Yeah. So if you're so what does Local Worship Project do? Get into the tangibles.
Mm-hmm. So the idea for the Local Worship Project is, well, I guess what I'll preface this with for people who aren't familiar with music and how it works in the church. The way that music used to work in the church was you had a hymnal that people would buy. This is back in the hymnal days. And before then, it was, different songs on sheets of paper. They've always had licensing, by the way. That's not necessarily an enemy here. But they would write a song. It made its way into a hymnal. People would purchase that hymnal, and then they would sit in the pews or on their chairs, and that's what they would sing from every single Sunday. Well, move up to around the 80s and 90s, and projectors started becoming a thing. And in that time frame, what started to become really popular was contemporary Christian music that was not in the hymnal, and people would project the lyrics so that everybody can see them all at the same time, and it cut down costs.
And if you get in a business sense of this, every church, every church has at least 100 hymnals that they've bought. They've paid $5 a book or $4 a book or probably $2 a book back then of a hymnal, and maybe bigger churches have 300. So you're talking an annual. Say if the church bought 200 books at $2, a church is spending $300 to $600 a year, but maybe those lasted for 20 years,
right?
And then all of a sudden, when the modern worship chorus movement was happening in the late 70s, early 80s, projectors, they're not buying hymnals anymore.
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so how do we know who's supposed to get? Because when you're buying sheet music, or which is essentially what a hymnal is, you're buying the music that was part of the arrangement. It was a publishing deal. We're
Yes.
gonna take this song and put it printed and sell books, and theoretically songwriters got paid, or a lot of them are classics, or what do they call them, in the public domain. But so
Yeah.
now screens into the picture. Someone thinks, oh, songwriters need to get paid for their work, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And it comes from the mentality of licensing and publishing. So like publishing is a really important function for people to be recognized for their work. There are people who publish something and do it more public domain or in what we call the Creative Commons, which is it's usable by people without them having to necessarily pay for it, but they still have to attribute it to the person who created it. Kind of like when you say, here is a song from David before you read the psalm. It would be very similar to that. You give credit to the author when you can. And then there are the other licensing models, which is just um, the more common way to do it, which is going to be every time that you read this music, you need to have the right to read it in public. Or kind of thinking about, I guess a good common example these days would be when you see all these things on YouTube with doing reactions to videos or reactions to shows. They can only play so much of that before they start talking, otherwise it's illegal. They have to like kind of break it up a little bit, because you can only get away with so much before the licensing is breached and you can get sued for playing that movie without having the rights for that movie, especially if you're making money from it on your channel. And so that becomes a really big issue, because what you can do is you can play songs that other people wrote, and you can charge money to have people listen to you play that song, and you're making money from somebody else's work. And so there need to be rights against that, so that you're not making money off of somebody else's production, their creative process. And so licensing is important, publishing is important. Um, but what we had to do at that point, when projectors became a thing, was we had to kind of pick a lane of how are we actually going to do this licensing thing. And the easiest way to do it um, was to have a blanket license for any song that was on a platform online, or a platform of where you would get those songs from. And so CCLI came out at that point, which creatively copyrighted all of the licensing for churches to use for all songs that they can have in their libraries. So they started negotiating with different publishers and companies that had Christian music artists, and they started negotiating, hey, we're going to purchase licenses, host those licenses that we have on our website, and then we will allow churches to pay a fee either yearly or monthly to be able to rent all of those songs, whatever they want from our catalog. And so they were solving the problem. Again, not necessarily a bad thing, just solving a problem so that people legally could play those songs that were going on. So that's how they started solving the projector issue. Yeah. And then you start moving forward into 2020, or I'm sorry, 2000s, and then into the 2010s, and you start seeing the internet popping up. And so when the internet pops up, people start going wild, wild west and just grabbing whatever they want. And they have no idea that they're breaching contracts when they're publishing music that other people wrote, and they're recording themselves doing it. YouTube becomes a thing. People start streaming themselves, or they start recording themselves singing songs. And then the iPhone comes out, Spotify, or not Spotify, iTunes, and all of this. And it starts wrecking the CD, the record, process for these music industries that were making money off of records and tapes and CDs and all of this. Now it was, you pay 99 cents and you have a song forever, really. And it just changed overnight to where now they really needed to start enforcing these copyright rules. At that point, they were still a little kind of iffy. You had to be big enough to really get sued over doing something wrong, because you wouldn't ever be able to pay the money anyways. But after that iTunes stuff happened and the internet started coming out, it started becoming a lot tougher for people to go unnoticed with that, because there was no more money being made the normal way. And so that's when you start seeing the rise of Christian tours. And you start seeing the rise of Christian artists becoming an icon in places. And you start seeing celebrity status within that. You start seeing the Dove Awards become a really prevalent thing, which is the Grammys, but it's for Christian music instead. And so you start seeing all these different things copying what the world is doing with secular music industry and just pasting it over to the Christian music industry. And it starts to become kind of a niche within a niche, especially when it comes to worship music. The same type of practices that we see with marketing and algorithmic status that supports people. And of course, everybody argues about whose theology is right when it comes to music. And so what Christian artists had to do in response to that was they had to become extremely vague with their music and how they would write. And so now you start seeing less and less storytelling and stories, again, going back to biblical stuff. If we're going to share the stories of what God did in our music so that it's sticky in our memory, and then we're going to tell the stories of what he's doing now, that's gone. Now it's just, I'm just going to sing about God, how awesome he is, or I'm just going to sing, you are great to him. And I'm going to call that worship because I can sing that in any church, in any context, and it makes sense. But if I tell you a story, a specific story of something that happened culturally around me locally, it's not going to make sense to everybody. And so therefore, it's not going to get as far reach. It's not going to hit the algorithm as hard. It's not going to make as much money. And that's what it really kind of started coming down to. I guess the progression we see is it started out a lot more like, hey, let's try to give on both sides with that heart posture. The church would buy things to say thank you to people and to respect the creators. And the creators were trying to give with public domain licensing, or at least give to the point where they weren't coming after people or trying to pursue more and more and more and more money and making careers out of this. They were just writing songs and they found their way in the hymnal and they would get paid for it by the church. It went from that to now it's become a competition of sorts with artists trying to find their way into an industry that celebrates and rewards how well marketed you are, how good your story is, and how reachable your songs are to every tribe, tongue, and nation. And so they're going to bring you out for everything that you can actually produce. And then when you stop producing things that are of worth, then your family's not going to get a paycheck anymore at that point. And you're going to have to go off and do your own thing while they bring up the next guy who is producing more. And by the way, all of these music companies used to be Christian owned. They are now owned by other companies that are not Christian, especially the big ones like Universal Studios owns Capital Christian Music Industry. And so the whole CCM movement is actually owned by Universal Studios. So there's a lot of stuff that happened over the years that dragged us away from that heart posture of giving and into this heart posture of I'm going to go over here and count the coins. And so you can only love God or money, like that's a proposition given to us. And not just in music, but especially we see it here. It's really simple to go down that road to saying, I love God. And then you slowly start churning over to money because you're forced to in the way that it's enterprised right now. There's really no getting away from it. Otherwise, you just have to stay away from it.
Ooh, yeah. What's interesting, well, this isn't like can you hear me? This isn't
Yep.
this isn't abnormal to Christian culture in the sense of like any restaurant or bar you go into or public place where they're playing music over the PA or the stereo legally is required to pay a servicing fee, ASCAP, BMI. There's organizations that are theoretically, it's the same idea. If you pay us a subscription, it includes this catalog songs. You can play any, and you can buy different licenses. Say for coffee shop, it's not like a 24/7. If it's a bar that has cover bands or live music, it covers that. And there's like tiers for how big your square footage calculated by your hours open. But what's interesting is like you would think like that's coming from an entertainment vibe, aesthetic. Like you, if you go into an Italian restaurant, they're going to be playing different music than if you go into a dive bar, right? So it's contributing to this. No, not probably most of the places we go to aren't doing that. So legally, someone could walk in and say, "Hey, we're giving you a fine." You know, they're not reporting songs, but like it's been populated into this church model. When in theory, a King David is writing a song with a 15-year-old King David before he's king is watching his sheep in a field with his back against the rock playing the harp, learning how to play, expressing his heart, writing probably many of the Psalms that are in the Bible, he was writing then, and then they just lived with them, and then he transcribed it with Asaph. You know, like it got written down. The words got written down. That's why it says for the lyre, for the harp. But yet it was from this, and then those songs probably ended up being sung in the temple, and no one was paying David for them. But so like it's interesting where this pop disconnect of where it feels, I think you feel this, where the idea of industry, or even if we call it the Christian industry, that's a whole nother conversation. But like it's influencing how we worship and how therefore the theology affects the community of believers more than it should. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, no, I think so. And, I got this. I guess if I could just be like super blunt about what I think would solve everything,
Please.
just me aside from it, I think if Christian songwriters would stop looking at the sub niche of Christian music as their means of income, and they would just try to go out in the culture and write good music and say, that's how I'm going to earn my money if I want to be a musician and earn money. And then anything I write for the church that just comes out of me, I'm just going to give to the church. I'm just going to let God's people sing it. I think if they thought of their income and their survival as just part of their artistry and their path in life as somebody who chooses creative arts as a career, then they can contribute to the culture around us in a beautiful way in the secular world. They could actually invade that space and be ministers and salt and light out there. Instead, what we see is when you have Christian artists cross over, because they don't even know what to do with the Christian music industry because it's so corrupt in some levels, that you see them demonized for doing that. And all they're doing is going out and trying to be salt and light. They're Christians writing in a world that needs it. And I think if they said, hey, I'm not going to pursue a career writing Christian music as far as writing worship music. Instead, I'm going to pursue a career writing music and getting into that world. But then when I write songs that are really just for the Lord, like prayer songs and testimony songs, I recognize those are for the Lord and those are for his people. And my heart is, I just want to give that. And then I think the church's response should be equally as giving and saying, we want to thank you for that. And so, yeah, thank you for giving it to us. Now we want to bless you and your family and say thank you for it. But I don't think it needs to be held by a pen and a lawsuit for them to have to give even a penny for sharing the gospel. I think that's where we go wrong. That's my hot take.
It's your hot take. Yeah, I think anyone doing anything. So if someone's whatever language you're going to use, I have a calling, I have a gift, I have an anointing. I think whatever percent, and let's say that same thing is also the thing that helps them earn money, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think when we think about it, I think we grow up thinking every time I do this thing, I'm going to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
Versus I think we should be thinking that it is a tithe. There is a portion of our ability and our gifts and our calling that we need to be participating in, no strings attached. Like this is my thing. I'm going to give, I'll give an example. My friend Gabe in Alaska runs a dirt moving company, right? But what a lot of people don't know is that, so he's putting in like dirt work or foundations or sewer work for like a new school or a new restaurant or new, government contract, or does road work, right? Laying drainage. But like at least 2 to 4 days out of the month, him and his crew are replacing septic systems for widows that can't afford it. And he shows up, and that's his ministry. That's his ministry. Like that's his gift. Like he's in his goal is to build a successful business, and he was a hard worker and ethics, like on bids and all that, and doesn't participate in those games. But the Lord's blessed him so much that he's like, I gotta have the position to bless others, no charge, no questions asked. And I think that would be a good way. And this is hard for a songwriter or an artist, right? But like to think of like, there's a portion of what you do that God gave you to do to bless others. And how are you, and what that percent's going to be different for everyone. And that expense, that feeling of this cost me something is going to be different for everyone. But I think what I would want to teach my kids or songwriters, young musicians coming up, like, you don't do everything in life to get paid. Like there's things in your life that you do to bless others and to leave other people better than you found them. And because so much has been given us. Jesus didn't ask for cash payment for dying on the cross. And like, so we get in this thing of like, if Jesus didn't ask that for us, he asked for intimacy and love, right? He's an invitation to, I gave everything for no cost, no financial cost to you. You didn't buy this. This wasn't earned. And how would we apply that as creatives or as people working for the betterment of the church, or and it seems like you're on that page with Local Worship Project. So but there it's a big can of worms, my friend, because if you're asking a songwriter, right? If you're asking a songwriter, we want you to write a song and be on Creative Commons. Well, not everyone industry is not playing by those same rules. So it's gonna be a someone with a heart posture that is like, look, I believe so much in this thing that if someone took my song and put it on YouTube, with or without giving me credit, with or without paying me, I might be okay with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I claim my last statement as, this is what I really want. This isn't necessarily what the project's called to do.
Yes.
Because I think at the end of the day, I've been saying this to a lot of people, there's only one good firing away from the industry having that heart posture in some way and trying to reverse course. Is that ever going to happen? I don't know. That's up to God. Is the industry...
What do you mean one firing away? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, it's the person in charge, right? Like a good board of directors or a good CEO in one of the big publishers, or one of the big agencies that has artists. Like that's really important. If they can break down that wall that they've built up, or that idol, I should say, that golden calf that they've built up, saying this is what we value. And the Dove Awards are really the pinnacle of that. Let's celebrate how many clicks this thing got, and let's honor this person for having the most popular song instead of honoring the Lord. And let's make literally a statue for this person to receive because we're honoring them. Like, I mean, that is mind-boggling to me for worship music that we do that. But it's literally a golden calf that's built for worship, And we're saying, just like the Israelites said on Mount Sinai, like they wanted the Levites to build this golden calf because they asked, we just want an image to worship for our Lord. And the debate there really is, were they trying to have people worship Yahweh and they just didn't know what he looked like? And so they were asking, could you give us an image so that we can worship him? Or was it something else? Either way, it was bad. Either way, it wasn't him. And so even if their intentions were great and they were just trying to worship Yahweh, they still fell short because they got distracted from the truth, right?
There is so much in this story. One, you got Aaron, who's just become the high priest. Aaron is the first priest, the first high priest. He's in charge of this, and he builds an idol. Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
And then he's like, "Oh, I don't know. I just put this gold in this pile. It's an idol. Like, I'm just giving the people what they want. The people want to hit worship songs. I'm just giving it to them. I mean, it's their money. Like, so one, two, when it says when they're coming out of Egypt, imagine this horror movie feeling. Like if what I like to, when I'm thinking about, especially Old Testament passages, and like, I picture it like, what would this be like in IMAX? You're sitting there and like, because you lose that on the paper sometimes unless you meditate and just like think, what would this smell like? Go through each of the senses. What did this sound like? What did this look like? What did this smell like? What does this feel like? What's the other sense? Taste. Like if you're tasting smoke, or you're what does locusts in the air taste like? Like that it would be affecting something, but it's the last plague. All the firstborns are dead. And just think of that. You're in the middle of Egypt and you know he's delivering you, but yet every household is wailing. Think of walking down your street and you're hearing screams and wailing. And like, this is a horror movie. Like, this would be a terror, even though you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, the Lord is with you. They're still walking down these neighborhoods. And it's like the creepy clown scenes where it's all black and you got these creepy clowns like because you're hearing this sound, you're hearing this wailing sound of death, and yet they're throwing their gold at you. Yeah. Because it says they gave them wealth and their gold. They're saying, get out of here, get away from us. So the favor, that's Psalm 105, the spoils for what they had not toiled for, were being given to them. God was providing them on their journey. And that's what they used to make the golden calf. Yeah. So the thing that God favored you, he gave you blessing and provision for your going forward, you've taken around and turned into an idol in 10 minutes.
Well, and you go even back further than that, though, right? And so, like, why was Aaron in the picture? Or, why was he in the picture as the priest? And it's because Moses said, I can't speak in the burning bush. And what you find later is Moses never needed Aaron. He really talked all the time, he spoke all the time for the Lord. And what Moses was called into was to be the leader and the priest, the royal priest, right? He was called to be that, but he didn't. And so he only used one role. But if you even look at the Mount Sinai, when Aaron does this, Aaron was too scared to go up with Moses too. All of them were too scared to go up before the real God. And so they stayed down while Moses went up there on behalf of them, doing the priestly thing, going into the Holy of Holies, spending time looking at the back of God. I mean, he's spending time with him. Everybody else is down there wondering because they're too scared and saying, man, what does he look like? And then you see, of course, well, man, we're going to use the best that we have. And that we're going to use all the gold, all the jewels, everything. And they make something that is not him. And they worship it. And so even the best intentions, I think, if your heart is just not, I revere and I fear the Lord, it is always going to take you down a path where you're worshiping something else. And that is what has happened in the Christian music industry. It happens in everything. It would happen with your friend, too, from Alaska, if he didn't say, no, I'm going to make a point to worship my Lord by giving the best that I have to people. And he does that with with the tools that he has to sacrifice. And he makes his sacrifice to the Lord by giving to people in his community and honoring the Lord that way. And so, like I said, music isn't the only sacrifice, but we got to get out of this mentality of saying, I need money. And that's where the music artists are right now. They feel like they're in a position where, but my family has to eat. And I really just want to challenge that with artists and say, your family can eat, I promise you. And you can also say, my best goes to the Lord first, and he will provide the rest for my family to eat. And whether it's in this music Christian industry thing that's happening right now, or if it's something else, if you get that heart piece right and you say, I'm going to sacrifice my best and my first to the Lord like a tithe, then you're getting yourself aligned the right way. And everything you do after that is going to start prospering when it comes to kingdom work. And that's the priority. And God's going to take care of you just like he does the lilies of the valleys, just like he does the sparrows. He's going to feed your family. He's going to clothe you guys. It may not be everything you want, but he's going to provide for you everything you need. And what you put your hand to is going to prosper because you love the Lord. That's your heart posture. So whatever you do is going to start prospering. And again, prosper isn't necessarily what we think prosper means in America these days. And so we got to get out of that mindset. But yeah, that's what the project is there to do. I guess practically, you asked me what is it giving, and I took that long road to explain the history of it to share that. What it is we're gonna create an actual platform online, and that platform is going to host Christian music that is to be played in church. We're going to start there. We'll do songs that can be radio played in the future, but we'll start with songs that can be played in church. That will be using a different licensing process called the Creative Commons. And that Creative Commons gives people the rights to be able to play the music, to sing the music in church, just recognizing the artists either on the screen or in even a piece of paper that they hand to everybody saying, hey, this is the artist, this is the song. Or online just in the description of whatever video they're playing. They don't have to pay anything to share the gospel. And that's the artist giving. But what about the church? So the way that the church would give to say thank you for that and have this heart posture of giving back would be supporting their local songwriters when they come and they want to give one of their songs by saying, we're gonna fund that process. We're gonna give money for that artist to record, to produce, to edit, and create this song so that the church can use it at large. So think of it like this. I'm a worship pastor and I'm a songwriter. And I love writing music to the church. It's not my job. I'm a worship pastor in the local church. But I love writing music for the Lord. And I write a song for my church and for the church, whoever wants to play it. And I want to give it to the church. And so I'm working through that process, but it doesn't have all the tools that it needs for any church to be able to play that song. Well, what if my church decided, you know what, that's important, and we value that enough to say, we want to pay for that process to take place. We want to pay for that song to be produced in a good way. We want to pay for that song to be mixed down, for the resources like sheet music and the different, what churches do a lot of times is they break it down instrument by instrument. They have what you call stems, or each track of what instrument plays what, so they can recreate that in the worship team. And they can listen to what those songs are played like the drums play this and the guitar plays this. To create those resources, it takes money, and it takes time, and it takes skill. And so what if the church pulls the bill and flips the bill and says, we're going to pay for all that, and we're going to thank you, worship pastor, and pay you what that song's really worth. We're going to say thank you and give you some money for that. And so if the church says, we think that's worth something, we're going to give money for that creation. And the worship pastor says, I think that this is worth something, I'm going to give it for the church to be able to use. Then that marriage would help land that song and all the resources that are created onto the platform that we're creating, so that any church can play that freely from that point on, as long as we have it hosted there. And that's just an agreement we would have between the artist saying, how long do you want to host this song here? We would sign 3-year agreements for the licensing on that. But anybody who plays it on our site would be able to forever play that music as long as they keep that license from us for free. And so that's the starting point, is helping enable that creation, enable the churches to sponsor that creation, and then a place to host it so that other people can play it.
Yeah, and talk about the nuance of, I think when we were talking about this, it's not a label, it's not a record label. It's actually not a you said platform, but it's not like we're platforming. The way I think about it, it's more of a portal.
Yeah.
It's like a connection between people that feel like they were called to write at least a portion of their songs for use in the church, and where they get introduced or connected to churches that are like, man, I really want the gospel and truth of Jesus to be proclaimed through songs that we can use in our congregation. It's a connecting point, right?
Yeah. So
you don't own intellectual property.
No, and that's really important. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's really important that the local worship project would not own any rights or any intellectual property. Would be saying we're going to count the coins and split them up, as it were. So the point here is that the artist would hold 100% ownership of their song, and they would give it to us to host that song so that churches can come and they can grab it and play it in their churches for free. So we can't own that. Otherwise, the artist gets in legal issues when they do anything else with their song. And we're not trying to count the coins ourselves. And so that's why it's really important for the church to sponsor that, because it would sponsor the creation process that we would provide and the hosting process that we would provide. It lets us license it out for an agreement without us getting paid continually every time that song plays in that coffee house, or every time that song is played in a church. We don't get dimes off of that. Yeah.
Do you got any questions you want us to, should we go over any of these, or what? Oh, it's 6:15.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's hit those. Let's try to get through these in like 15 minutes. I think we can.
Okay. Pop one up at a time, Noella. Pop it up until I read it. Okay, sorry, here we go. What would be the vetting process for artists, especially concerning gauging someone's heart posture? Good question. All right.
Yeah, no, this is a really good question. And it's honestly one that I still need to think through a little bit.
You can take it away, Noella.
Yeah, this is one that I really don't have the whole thing worked out. I do think the vetting for somebody is going to have to be facilitated by some kind of a board, though. Some kind of a group that takes in an artist who says, I would like to enter into this relationship with licensing out my song, because we're going to pay for that license as a blanket fee, and that's how that artist gets paid, right? So if let's say we chalked up a song to cost $3,000, let's just say $3,000 for all the production and licensing the song, it costs $3,000. If we chose $500 to be that licensing relationship with us as the host and the artist, we would pay them $500 to license that music for 3 years. In order to do that, we need to vet that person on some level to make sure that they're in line with our beliefs and what we're trying to promote. And the heart posture is really what we're talking about. That's what we're trying to get after. I don't think that's something that I can just make a judgment call on my own. I think that's something that we need to have like-minded people who help create that process, that whole vetting process, who are able to assess the situation.
Yeah, I think
there's some help on this one, honestly.
Yeah, there's lots to figure out for sure. I think this touches to what your heart is for this anyway. It's community. You just don't want songwriters putting their songs and know it's relationship. They're a part of the community because you want them to develop other artists, or you want to put like-minded songwriters together that feel a similar calling I think that could be it. Anytime they collaborate in this environment, that's the one that they share. Lots of complications there, but I think it's relational, and you would have like some pastoral oversight of some part where they're getting to know people over the months, engaging and, coming to an agreement what it is.
Yeah, and to that being said, or to that point, there's a couple things that are built in. So I do have a process for the contract. The contract is really, really tough for the songwriter and for us. And the reason why it's really hard to give something away for free. There's so many nuances to that. And so there's opportunity there to give all the clauses for if there's a breach within that contract, which would really test the heart posture of somebody. Most of that stuff is going to test that heart posture. It would be somebody, for instance, who says, hey, I want this song to be given to the church. But then the next year, when they're still 2 years away from that licensing being paid in full, essentially, or their licensing timeline, if we paid for 3 years, they're only at 1 year, them saying, hey, I got a publishing or a deal with this agent in this company, and I want my song because that's part of the agreement. They have to have all my songs, and they'll try to take it away from the local worship project hosting because their new publisher wants all of that, or their new label wants all of that music. That's going to be a thing we will probably experience. And so if the heart of somebody was wrong, we'll have moments to kind of see where their priorities really land. If they're just wanting to double dip on funds or whatever, we got paid over here, but now somebody else, we got noticed because our song blew up on the project site and everybody's playing it. So now a label wants us, and we're going to take our song with us because that's more important. Well, to that, I would just say, you got to let them go. You can't hold on to them, right? And so some people are going to have that issue where they, and not issue in the sense that they're bad people, but just they don't quite understand yet what they did and why it's important that they left something for people to have. But on the other side of it, I think people who are scared to give something away and just really want to make profit off of it, they're going to say things constantly, again, for that board to kind of look at, like, what happens if A, B, C, D, or E happens? How am I getting money? How am I getting paid? What are they talking about more? Are they talking about people more? Are they talking about money more? Are they talking about their own security and prosperity? Or are they talking about the church and their prosperity? Like, where's their heart aligned? And you can get that a lot when you have more people looking in on that. And the contract really has a lot of those things pinned down as they go through that. So I think that process, even of itself, is going to help vet some of that. But there's also the vetting process isn't just heart posture, it's also quality. And so that's a whole nother conversation that we can get to another time. But there's a whole process for the intake of a song of what are our standards when we choose a song that we're going to actually pay money for and license, because it can't just be any song that comes in and any songwriter. We have to have some kind of a vetting process, even for the quality, which sounds kind of gross, maybe, but it just has to happen at the same time. So
yeah, that's good. All right, next question, Noella. All right, what stories have you heard from the pilot participants? So you've done a few pilots with groups of songwriters together. Yeah, from the pilot participants that tell you that local worship project is still worth it. Tell us a good story. Tell us a feel-good story, Casey.
I'll tell you a weird story that felt really good in the moment. So when we were ready to launch the pilot, I felt like Satan kind of attacked this with everything that he had. I had been working for about a year, gathering all this, gathering support, and I had everything figured out for launching a pilot in the city that I was a part of, doing that church stuff with that audio production. And we launched, and I had about 7 songwriters involved in that, and I had 7 churches involved in that. And the idea was that we were going to have each of them create a song. I had producers as well, local producers that they were working with. So if they couldn't produce music, they had somebody to partner with. So we were testing a lot of things. And for people who don't know what a producer is, they're the ones who are really taking that song, like the melody and the music that a songwriter does. And if a songwriter doesn't know how to arrange it with all the other instrumentation, that's what a producer really does. They come in and they help give the drums to it, get the bass line, help the background vocals, and all that magic stuff that sounds so full in a song to happen.
Fix a broken chord. Yeah.
Yes, and they help tweak it, and that songwriter to help just push back a little bit on that. And so we had all those pieces together, and we started running it. And 2 weeks into running it, out of a 5-week process, my family got hit with about 5 different simultaneous issues that I'm not going to like elaborate into. Some of them were deeply personal, that took us way far away from being able to pay attention to the pilot anymore. And so we tried to pursue and keep going after it, but there was just no ability to hang on to it. In the middle of that, though, there was this one songwriter. She was a mom, out in the middle of nowhere, in the country, and there was the producer locally. They decided on their own to get together in a room and to produce one of her songs. And so I'm sitting there. We had a Slack group that was facilitating this process, and I was documenting everything. And I saw them in that Slack room post video after video of them creating this song, just in a room by themselves. Just here's video 1, we're just going over the melody. Video 2, we're hashing out how the bass guitar is going to sound, until it got to the point to where they had a demo track fully produced within a few hours of donated time that producer gave, and all of her time that she took away from her family, and her husband facilitated that time taking off of work. Like they bought into it in that much of a degree, just giving. And that was where that hard posture stuff just really clicked in for me, of this was worth something to them. And I couldn't do anything from that. So it kind of sucked on the other end, because I wasn't able to take that really great victory that I saw happening, this blossoming. I was tearing up watching this, because I was not able to pursue it any further. But watching it was just like, wow, this has got legs.
To me, that's encouraging, because it tells me there are people out there. If you say this idea is crazy, it'll never work. Well, to me, that's the best idea those are the best ideas to pursue. When people tell you it won't work, or no one ever does that, it's like, great, sign me up. Like Lewis and Clark going across. Great, no one's ever gone past the Missouri.
Yeah.
Great, sign me up. It's like going for new territory. I mean, nothing of value, or nothing that anyone ever talks about in a positive way will be easy.
Yeah.
And it's probably you're blazing a trail. But what's encouraging about this, you have 2 people on both sides of the picture that say, this is worth it. I want to participate. So you're not and what's interesting, it's a mom. It's someone that's probably maybe has gotten over the idea that I'm going to be a full-time professional musician, touring musician, but I have a gift that God's given me, and I got to be faithful and do this thing. And that producer type, the technical type, is like, man, this is so cool. And they're giving their time for it. It's just like, if there's 2, there's 200. If there's 200, there's 2,000. If there's 2,000, there's 20,000. I don't know where it goes, but there are people out there that this would be important. This idea and this concept is important too.
Yeah. 100%.
Oh, next question, Noella. Let's keep it moving. All right. What are some of the biggest obstacles currently to implementing a vision like the Local Worship Project, and how would those obstacles be overcome? By prayer and perseverance.
Pretty much, right? So, like I said, the obstacles, they can vary. In that case, with the pilot, the first one, it completely stopped us in our tracks. So while I'm watching that story take place, it was cheering for my heart, but it was also devastating, because we were like, we literally had no ability to pick that ball up and keep running with it. And so it took about another year before I actually met you, Chris. And that was the first time I had thought about the project since then, since that pilot, because we just had no reason for God to really take that push again that we had seen. It was really more about surviving at that point. And so God really reignited that, and that's when all this started happening again. But an obstacle, I would say the biggest obstacles that come between anything, and I'm not going to try to be dismissive of practical things here, but it really is your willingness to say yes to things that other people are going to find weird or divisive. And so saying yes to God saying, do this thing, and then having the courage to go and ask the questions and to do the grunt work is the biggest obstacle. It's what I faced really at the beginning of it as well. I wanted that shortcut a little bit, where it's like, okay, here's the vision. Now everybody just buy into it. That's not going to happen. What's really going to happen is this vision is going to take a grinding assault of going through and finding out what every one of those obstacles are for people, and then trying to find a practical solution to it until it finally gets refined enough to be summarized in a simple statement.
Yeah,
I think what that's going to look
like. And this, being an entrepreneur, you start with an idea 3 years later. So there are certain things that are still true, certain things you thought would be over here that ended up over here, things over here that went away. But what I think is as a challenge, and you have more experience in talking to the church people that would be interested in this. I think that's the difficult part, is getting over the hump of getting Christians or churches or church leaders or whatever it is, a head pastor or an elder board, because foundationally you're trying to convince them their theology around it is wrong. In a worst case, that sounds heavy, but like, you need to rethink this. And so I think there'll be a lot of like cold calling, knocking on church doors, and they're like, "You guys are crazy. Those guys are crazy." Like, no, like they won't even understand like what you're trying to do.
Well, and to that point, the biggest obstacle we were facing at the time for even funding, because like a pilot costs something, you need to be able to produce, and that's why those people were giving away those hours, because nobody paid, right? And they still thought it was worth it, so they gave. But in a better world, that we would have a few people who would say this is worth something, just like David did to Aruna, and say, yeah, I'll flip the bill for $15,000 to produce 5 songs for these guys who are giving their time.
Yeah.
And so the hardest part I was finding, the obstacle there, was people love the idea in the church, but I haven't found the perfect way to communicate with them yet to where what you just said. I haven't found that.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
The obstacle isn't them. The obstacle is writing the narrative, the truthful narrative that allows them to see it. Like, oh, and that passage of, I won't offer a sacrifice that costs me nothing is a great start. But
it is. But I think the next step for that is producing an actual pilot that shows them on the platform itself, on the hosting site, this is the finished product. This is what happened. Here's the stories, here's behind the scenes of these guys doing the thing. Here's the stories of the people who gave to it. And this is why it's meaningful. And once they can see something like that, I think they can understand. But I think for them, it's going to be more about that end result.
What is that called? What's the tech term for a working website? What is that called?
Beta?
No. Proof of concept. Okay. Noella, you got time for a couple more? Noella, give us another one. What is your ideal outcome / experience for a musician or worship leader who gets involved in the local worship project? What's your ideal outcome experience for congregants?
Yeah, that's a good question. I talk about this all the time with Autumn, my wife, because we have a lot of arrows in the quiver of the entrepreneurial, idea bag. And we want all of those arrows whenever God knocks another one on the bow to shoot towards the same target. Another analogy of that would be the local worship project for an artist and a church would be like 2 separate buses that you're inviting people to hop onto. But you want both of them to drive to the same location. And so what's that location that they both end up in? And what Autumn and I are very passionate about is we want to see people become owners of the Great Commission in their local communities. We wanted them to be obedient to what God has called them to do. And so and that's going to look different for a musician, a songwriter. It's going to look different for a church congregant who's sponsoring that songwriter, because they're entering into this relationship from two different angles. One is saying, I'm giving up the means for my family to live, maybe, if that's what they're saying as a songwriter, because that's usually the issue that we're having a hold up with them. The congregant saying, I don't really know exactly what this money's going to, but I'm going to give it anyways, having trust that God's going to use it. We want both of them to end up on this path of experiencing, one, wow, when I'm aligned with God, I start actually living a life that is focused on kingdom and not on myself. And then the other thing that we want to see them start doing is getting more involved in those relationships at a coffee house or in their grocery store with the person they talk to all the time, and being able to experience what it is to be obedient to God. Both of them have to say yes to get on the bus. And so they're being obedient to the Lord for maybe the first time. I don't know. But eventually, we want to drive them to the point to where that obedience becomes second nature, and those stories just coming out of here's what God's doing today. Here's what God's doing today. And they can't shut up about what God's doing because they're experiencing it every day. That's where we want them all to end up.
I could see a case for a songwriter. I mean, most songwriters are relational. They might be introverts, but they're relational. But they're looking for meaning. And imagine they have a song and a church has used it, and they hear a story about what happened when this person heard it, or this it's changed people or made them think about something in a different way. I guarantee you, most songwriters, if they say, I want $100 and not hear from anyone, or I don't want any money and I heard it affected this one person, they're going to choose that. Now, can it be both? And there's this mutual favorable edification support happening. And I imagine for a church, or having a relation, it's relational. I think, like, you're in our community, you're here, we see you once a month, we see you regularly, we see you're having influence. You know what I mean? Like that dynamic of, and now they're affecting the quote worship culture in their church or their community. They have something to say and teach, and they're feeling connected. Oh, you're the songwriter. They're getting that. To me, I think it comes back to relationships.
On that platform itself. And therefore, deconstructing this idolatry position that no sensible Christian songwriter wants to be in, where they have to be on this platform. Instead, they can be talking to the people directly who are playing their music and sharing their stories. And they can share it with each other and re-inspire these songwriters to maybe write another song because of the conversations they're having with these people on this platform. And so there's a lot of that, trying to build that community. Again, go back to my story, train, equip, and unite. Uniting, trying to get people together is a big piece that we want to see breathed into this.
Yeah. Let's do one more question. What specific need or gap in the modern worship landscape sparked the idea? We might have talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well then let's address this. Will that be eliminated by the will that gap be eliminated by the local worship project entirely, or is this a stepping stone to something else in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've been really clear about in our mandate, my wife and I, is that we're not trying. Oh, there we go. We're not trying to tear down the Christian music industry. Instead, we're trying to just simply do what God called us to do within it. And so I would say stepping stone would probably be where I would lean there. There's a great passage in Philippians where Paul is talking about people who are sharing the gospel for selfish motives and gain. And they're talking about the Lord, they're talking about Paul, really just to elevate themselves. Their heart's wrong. And then he talks about how there's people who do it in a beautiful context, how they do it to serve the Lord and how they do it to lift him up. He's in prison at this point while he's writing, by the way. But what he comes to the conclusion of at the end is, as he summarizes it, he says, I don't care how the gospel's spread. It's being spread.
Yep.
And so I think it's really important to guard our hearts when we're creating something like this within a system that I would say absolutely is doing it for their own gain and out of selfish reasons. For the most part, not everybody, again. So I'm not on the hearts of everybody there. I know there's great people in there, but 100% it's become corrupt. Who cares? The gospel's being shared. And I have to have that heart posture as well. I can't be so vain to say, mine's the only way to do it. I'm just going to try to do it the most Jesus-like that I possibly can because he's called me to do that. And that's my sacrifice and my offering of saying, I don't have to be the only person on the block. I don't have to, and I don't care. At least the gospel's being spread. And so many people have been saved through this industry that I would call corrupt. And so praise God, they've been saved.
Yeah,
So,
I would lean to from what I know, I'd lean to stepping stone too. It's like one part of the greater goal of reforming worship theology, or how we think about the application of music in our worship. Like, because that's what really that's if we do this and are successful, but we didn't disciple anybody, or we didn't change or contribute or coach or whatever, help songwriters process a different way of thinking and also give them a different avenue. I mean, I think we would fail if we missed the heart posture. We're reforming heart posture, or giving people that want to be formed correctly, not by us, by the Lord, a way to participate in the whole thing differently. Like not everyone's called to maybe be a head worship leader, or clearly not to go to Nashville and write songs for the industry, but they might be called to something like this. They might be called to I'm excited. I mean, I think it's filled with possibility.
Yeah. No, it's really exciting. And yeah, I guess for tonight, I mean, I'm going to have to kind of wrap up on what I can talk about today, but this has been good. We have not been able to talk about this for a while. Thank you for you, Chris, just asking me questions. I have not been on this side of it. I hope I'm giving good answers and concise.
No, it's good. I think good.
I'm more of an interviewee.
I like pulling ideas out of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun.
All right. Well, Chris, I'm going to let you, since you're the one who's been doing this hosting today. You want to just close this out and finish it out?
Sure. I do. Lord, I just thank you for this chance to talk. And I just ask for favor and divine strategy and timing and provision for Casey and Autumn's idea for the local worship project. And our desire, Lord, is not to build Casey's fame, not to build a brand that is just another blah, 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 blah. Our desire is to have the correct heart posture for you, and for your name to be elevated, and for you to have the glory, and for right thinking about who you are and how that relates to us. And we just want to give back. We want you to be honored. And I just ask you to cover all. I'm thinking about musicians right now, people who are called that are maybe 13 and 14 and 15, and they might be 24 or 25, and they might be in the later seasons of life filled with frustration in their 30s and 40s and 50s. But I ask you to show them and lead them and show them how to play like David, with his back against a rock, watching his sheep, playing before the Lord with no other posture but a heart posture that says, I love you so much, I'm going to try to craft what's in my heart as a tone and a melody to the Lord, without considering where this song goes or how rich I'm going to be. And I ask you just to call anointed worshipers to yourself for your glory and their joy, and that you would connect the dots, God. We just give this vision up to you and ask for your name to be glorified. We love you and we bless you. Amen.
Amen.